Well, the passing of George Floyd has been a catalyst for renewed calls for police reform in the United States, but also a call to end racism. Around the world, protests in solidarity with Black Americans have been commonplace in the last 2 weeks. I Can't Breathe and Black Lives Matter have become a call to action for the fight against the racial discrimination and the dismantling of oppressive structures globally. Now, joining us now is Yolande Kwinana, who is part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. How is America? You've been there 4 years now. South African, abroad. I guess it's a feeling a bit like home, but as a Black person, you've learned a lot in a short space of time, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of good things to say about being here, but one of the things that I always ask people when they ask me, how is it being here, is that I immediately felt Black. In contrast to being in South Africa, where I just felt, a human being. You walk into a store just like everybody else, but, here you walk into a store, most likely the storekeeper is going to be watching you. Most likely they will call the police if they feel like you're dressed in a certain way. You have to behave in certain ways in the workplace, otherwise you'll never get ahead. Police interactions. So how you encounter the police, regardless of whether you're being attacked or someone's attacking you, it could become a deadly situation on your end if you're a Black person. So I think that's been the most painful experience.
So this story of George Floyd, sadly, is much, much more common than perhaps people understand.
Yeah, definitely. I can't even think of how many of my friends who are African-American men, tall people, and they'll tell me all the time, I get stopped by police all the time. I've driven with friends and, we're not doing anything wrong, but we're just driving, and for no apparent reason, we're getting stopped. And the feeling there is we're all free, because you've seen the videos, Philando Castile being shot right in front of his very young daughter, right? So you know that there is no regard for your life by the law in this country, and that's a very, very scary feeling.
All right, you're an activist, and so before George Floyd, you were already out there agitating for change. What happens now, though, in this moment as it's being described?
What do you mean?
As in, what happens next? He's buried now, and he's started something, and I think a lot of people perhaps not quite sure what. And I suppose you as an activist, you've always been fighting a fight. What happens tomorrow and next week?
Good question. So, I mean, there's more than just George Floyd. I think George Floyd has become a global symbol of what has continued to go on in the United States, but there's more than George Floyd, right? There's Ahmaud Arbery, and then there's the Ahmaud Arbery's that we didn't capture on video. Because if you think about what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, if the other gentleman wasn't there, we never would have known that he died that way. There's Breonna Taylor, who also wasn't captured on video. All that, there's more than just George Floyd in this, and it's really about changing policing in America. So really reforming how they do things through reallocation of funds, right? A lot of the work we do can be replaced through mental health services, social work services. None of this aggression needs to be pointed at every situation.
It's unlikely that we're going to see the kinds of crowds and protests that we're seeing right now carrying on for a long, long time. So how do you translate that into something perhaps more sustainable?
So I myself have recently created a coalition for my area, which is Arlington. So we're really working on justice reform in our area. As I said, reallocation of police funds, but also creating policies in place like what Campaign 08 can't wait policies, things like that. So to ban chokehold, to completely eradicate the use of deadly force. There shouldn't be a reason to use deadly force if someone is unarmed. So working on projects like that, I think, can continue the fight. There have been a lot of bills just recently, just in the past week, I feel like, that have been passed through Congress that are really going to change things for a lot of communities.
All right, so a lot of politicians have stepped up, and we saw Nancy Pelosi and others taking the knee. And I guess some people might be in two minds by some of the things that they're seeing, that they're saying, but hang on, why now? And I just want to get your thoughts as somebody observing all of this, because, you know, we're in an election year, and so sometimes some of these things can be hijacked by politicians for another reason.
I definitely think so. There's a lot of people who don't want to be on the wrong side of this. There's a lot of voices that are speaking up, corporate voices, diversity of voices, which is something we haven't seen in the past, right? So in the past, it's very much been Black anguish, Black anger around these issues. But now we're seeing anger across the board. Black, white, Hispanic, everybody is outraged. So nobody wants to be on the wrong side of this. Even within corporate companies, for instance, my company, nobody wants to be on the wrong side. Everybody wants to release a statement, donate money. So I definitely think when it comes to Congress and senators, they do want to be on the right side of this, especially the Democrats, because they want to be voted in, right? But I definitely always want to see the actual change that they'll do. They're the people in power who can enact certain policies that are really going to help people or a lot of African-American communities. So that's the most important thing. You can kneel, you can speak to it and say that you hear us, but what are you actually willing to do to show that?
Have you been surprised by the number of white people that have come to these marches and these protests?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I live in a county that is 70% white, and I think I struggle with some of the interactions that I have all the time, but I've been completely amazed by how many people have come out. The recent protest that I had, there were upwards of 1,000 people that came out. Majority of them being white. So it's been amazing, but it's also the kind of voices that we need. I think in any movement, Black, white, women, men, you need the other side to be the biggest advocate, to be the biggest voice, to really be able to bring about change.
All right, and your thoughts about some of the symbols that are being brought down? People might be surprised that they've survived this long. And is this something that we're going to start to see more and more?
I hope so. I hope so. I think it's been a long time coming. Some of those should have been put down a long time ago. So I really hope to see a lot more of that. And also, it's making me think that people are having more of an awakening of what those symbols really represent. Because I think the conversations previously have been, you know, don't take that down, it's part of my culture. But really thinking that through, what does that represent? What does your culture represent if it's really entangled within the history of slavery? So that has been really awesome to see, that awakening.
So perhaps as we start to close up, one of the things that I've been trying to figure out and observe as well, as someone who's from here and has traveled abroad, experienced different things, I wonder what your perspective is now maybe about some of the things that you left behind that perhaps we should be more agitated about, and perhaps use this moment to say, hang on, let's reflect on what's happening back home in South Africa.
Good question. So some of the things that I've been, following that I've really felt should be pushed a lot more in South Africa is, quite honestly, land reform.
You're right.
That's one of the things that has helped remove Black power from African countries, right? And really put it in the hands of Western countries, of white people, and then giving them the power as well to, like economic power, which we really need in South Africa. So that's one of the things that I would say need to really be pushed, but also education equality. Not everybody has the same level of education, and that's all entangled in economic power, right? And that's all entangled going all the way back to colonialism. So pushing on those issues is going to be key, but more than that, I'd really like to see a global push within the diaspora for all these issues. I think all around the world, we're all, as a diaspora, facing various issues, and I'd like to see us all come together the way we have for this George Floyd issue.
All right. Yolande, thanks so much indeed for your insights and talking to us. And we hope that you'll come home one day with all these skills that you've gathered out there and do some amazing things here as well.
I definitely will. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Yolande. All right, that's Yolande speaking to us there from Arlington in Virginia, in the United States, reflecting on some of the things that she's experienced in the past 4 years.